Hey there! In today's video, we're going to talk about something important for us as educators: how to collect and use behavioral data to help our students thrive. Whether you're teaching preschoolers or kids in elementary school, gathering data on student behavior, social emotional development, and academic performance helps us understand their needs and to create a plan to support them better. Let's dive in. First up, let's talk about how collecting and analyzing behavioral data helps maintain a positive classroom environment. Think about it. When we track things like off task behaviors, we start to spot patterns. Maybe certain behaviors happen right after a transition or when a student feels overwhelmed. If we catch these early, we can step in with support before things escalate. It also helps us recognize the things that are working well, like when a student gets excited about a new activity. When we know what's going on, we can make sure the classroom is a place where everyone feels safe and ready to learn. Now, let's talk about how to actually collect the data. There are a bunch of ways to document and organize what we see, and you don't need to be a tech wizard to make it work. Here are three methods you can use. First, we've got the old school method, using paper and pen. A clipboard with observation sheets is super easy to grab during class. As you watch students, you can jot down quick notes about behaviors you see. It's immediate and you don't have to worry about tech glitches. But of course, the downside of it is that it's easy to lose track of all those little notes if you don't stay organized. Next, let's talk tech. Tools like ClassDojo or Google Forms are great for keeping everything in one place. With ClassDojo, you can track both positive and negative behaviors in real time. It's easy to access and you can look back at patterns over time. Plus, these tools make it super easy to share the data with your team or even with parents if you need to. The downside, you'll need to make sure you have access to the tools and know how to use them. Lastly, there's the good old behavior chart. This one's visual and can be a great way to track behavior over time. You can create a chart that tracks certain behaviors throughout the day, like whether the student participated or stayed on task. It's simple but effective, and you can use it to show progress when talking to parents or colleagues. The only catch is that it can be a little more time consuming to set up and maintain. Now let's talk about the factors that might affect your data collection. There are a few things that can get in the way of getting accurate information. First off, we have teacher bias. It's important to be as objective as possible. Try not to assume things, just write down what you see. Another factor, environmental distractions. If there's a lot going on in the classroom, like a noisy hallway or a fire drill, it could affect the behavior data you collect. And lastly, time. Sometimes you just don't have the time to do a super detailed observation, but setting aside specific time for focused data collection can help. Behavioral data doesn't stop in the classroom. Working with families is key. Parents can give you insight into what's happening at home that might be influenced behavior at school. For example, let's say a student is struggling with transitions in class. By talking to the family, you might find out that they have trouble transitioning between activities at home, too. This helps you understand the full picture. Be sure to share the data with families and ask them for their observations. This two-way communication helps create a more consistent approach for the child. Speaking of families, it's really important to work with them to set common behavioral goals. This way, the student gets consistent support both at school and at home. For example, let's say a student is working on staying seated during circle time. You and the family can agree to use a timer at home to help them practice sitting still, just like you do in class. When everyone's on the same page, the student gets a unified message and they can make more progress. Behavioral data collection looks a little different depending on the age of the students. For younger kids like those in birth to preschool, you're doing a lot of observing. You're not really focusing on academic data yet, but more on social skills, how they interact with peers, and how they handle emotions. It's a lot of play-based observation. For students in K through grade 3, you'll start using more formal assessments and tracking things like participation in class discussions, task completion, or specific academic skills. It's a bit more structured because they're expected to show more skills by this age. Finally, let's talk about collecting data for kids with and without exceptionalities. For kids without exceptionalities, the data collection process is pretty straightforward. You're looking at things like behavior patterns, participation, and task completion. But for kids with exceptionalities, like those with autism or ADHD, the data collection gets more individualized. You'll need to track specific behaviors or triggers, sometimes use different methods like visual schedules or checklists. For example, a child with autism might respond better to visual cues, so you might use a chart to track how often they need sensory breaks during the day. So there you have it. Behavioral data is essential to helping us understand and support our students. Whether you're jotting notes on paper, using tech tools, or tracking progress with behavior charts, the key is consistency and collaboration. Work with your team, stay in touch with families, and always adjust your data collection methods to fit each student's needs. Thanks for watching and keep up the great work.